Now, if we looked into our needs, we can start to formulate a plan on how to fulfill them. Ken Robinson wrote in his book, The Element, that we live in two different worlds. There's the inner world and the outer world. The inner world that came into being when we did. It involves our thoughts and feelings, our moods, basically anything that is really our personal consciousness. The outer world involves other people, material things, events and circumstances. By looking into these different worlds, we can see how they might affect our needs. We also need to look at our brain. The brain is, although physiologically not a muscle, it needs a bit of exercise and training from time to time. Otherwise, like a muscle, it might atrophy or grow weaker. So let's use our needs as a guide to start this process of growth. First, we'll look inwards. We'll look at what our aptitudes, our skills and knowledge might be. This might feel quite uncomfortable. We're not used to looking inwards like this that often. And many of us downplay our skills and our aptitudes and our knowledge. So try to be honest with yourself. Take a look from outside of yourself. It's really easy to fall into the trap of thinking, if we know this, everyone must know it. But it's not often the case. So perhaps ask opinions of other people as well. A friend of mine, Charles Davis, he once said, "We greatly underestimate the effect of the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves." This is quite an interesting and powerful idea. Everything we tell ourselves inside in our inner world is really a story, and we have the power to change those stories. And to that effect, Charles created something called identity yoga. This is stretching our identity in order to figure out how we can change those stories so they best serve us. Now, there are just 3 steps to identity yoga. The first is identifying the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. Number 2 is assessing whether the stories we tell ourselves are helpful or not. Some of them may be. And 3, rewriting those stories. Now, this sounds like a simple 3-step task, but it can actually be quite difficult. It can be uncomfortable to start to confront some of our deep-held beliefs and feelings. However, persevere with it. Get other looks from different people. Try and figure out if those stories you've been telling yourself are true. Because the power behind this is when you're able to change those stories and able to reshape what you think about yourself and therefore what you project into the real world. Moving on to looking outwards, we can look at what affects us on an emotional level in the real world. We can list out different things. The needs lists, again, might help with this. Some things that we might feel almost trigger an emotional response from us. But again, we can actually start to take control of our own emotional response to trigger points from the outside world. The psychologist Viktor Frankl looked at this in depth. He said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space, it's our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So once we've noted down some of these stories we're telling ourselves, some of our inner thoughts and beliefs, and we confronted some of the outer world events and circumstances that may have an effect upon us, we can hopefully start to identify various different things, whether it's something we feel passionate about, something that we have a real fear of, something that will drive us on to do something that we had never imagined we could. We should start noting these down and seeing if we can put some order to what we have found. Perhaps we could do this visually, using mind mapping or vision boards. Or perhaps you could use postcards and post-it notes, and in that way you can start to sort things, group them in different ways. See what patterns emerge. See if some things are occurring more often. That might be an indication of where your passions really lie. Another thing you could do is try and identify connections between different areas from the inner world, the outer world, and our needs. This process puts you further down the path to achieving a full plan. In the next video, we're going to look at different distractions and bad habits and how we can deal with those. Hope to see you there.